What up peeps, my name's Dale Fellows, and I've been making a living as a video editor slash cameraman for just over 10 years now. And I thought I'd check out a plugin that I was quite interested to try called Dehancer, which is a film emulation plugin, to see how it sort of fits in to a day-to-day workflow, but also to see how I could use it maybe for things like personal projects like this YouTube channel. So I'd been looking at a lot of these plugins to see how they could work with my editor of choice, Premiere. Even though I have DaVinci Resolve and Final Cut licensed, I decide to use Premiere, or I have to use Premiere because one, I use it in my day job, and two, I'm just so damn used to it now that muscle memory is a hell of a thing. So I was trying to look for plugins that maybe made a better, more interesting visual look for my footage in Premiere. And funnily enough, Dehancer, one of the plugins, reached out to me and said, would you like to review our plugin? You can be as honest as you like, give us feedback, just in exchange for a license to use it, just to try it out. And I thought, hell yeah. So I'm gonna give you a quick tour through all the features before we discuss the price and maybe some things that I think could be improved. So here we are in Premiere. I've got my timeline preloaded with a clip I recorded on my DJI Mini 4 Pro drone. I thought it'd be a nice video to use as an example because there's blues and greens and sort of warm tones from autumn, winter, and it's a great one to see how it can affect those sort of color tones and also the really sharp sort of 4K image you get out of this. It's recorded in the log format. So in your effects panel, once you've installed it, you will find Dehancer. So the first tab is input. Now obviously this is just saying what input you're giving it, what footage you're giving it to work with. By default it's set to Rec 709, which is probably what you'll be giving it if you give it some basic footage off your iPhone or off a camera that just is on one of its default picture profiles. But obviously a lot of people will record in a log format. Now the good thing about this is it has a list of cameras, and as you can see you can pick from quite a decent list of cameras here. So first of all we're going to select a DJI log. Now I'm going to pick the Pocket 3 in this case. This is prematurely bringing me onto one of the improvements, but the drone that I have isn't on this list. Basically all that's doing is applying a pretty simple conversion LUT, just like you might do in your Lumetri. There's also some basic exposure controls and tint controls and temperature controls there, and also defringe if you want to remove your bangs. Film, that's got to be one of the main ones, right? Correct, well observed. So film is obviously all the different film stocks you can pick from to change the look of your image to emulate that of those film stocks. So for example, Kodak Vision 500T, and a lot of people like that. And if we hit enable, we can see what that does to the image. We have a much more muted, much more filmy looking image. I've added a little bit of contrast and saturation just so you can visually see a bit more what is going on with this image. And now we go down to print, which is another way of saying what you would output to, as in what film you would put your finished project on once you've made all your creative choices. We've got linear, which is just, it responds in a linear fashion, obviously, but we have some options here to pick different film stocks. And as you can see, if I switch to Fujifilm, that really changes how the image looks. We've got much cooler, more pastel-y tones going on. And then we switch to Kodak 2383 print film, which is a very famous and popular film stock. And if we pick that one, we've got some warmer tones in that one. And then we've got glossy paper, which is a bit more of a standard print. Within the print film options, the one I really like using is the color density, which is a way of bringing up the richness and the deepness of colors without overly saturating them and making them look sort of nasty. So we're just going to go back up to film compression, and this is one of the ones that I think make one of the biggest differences, and the one I've been using on both the app for Premiere and also the phone app. They have a phone app, by the way. I'll tell you about that in a moment. But this compresses the highlights and makes it respond more like film would, and I feel like this makes such a big difference. So if we go between off and on, you can see how much that affects those really bright parts of the image. Now we're on to the real filmy stuff. The grain, the film grain. And if we enable that, we can see there's lots of different effects we can add. And it really does affect the image. If we play it through, you can see that grain dancing, although this is uploaded to YouTube, so do expect a lot of compression and for that to go missing. So the way the grain reacts to the different parts of the image, it doesn't just look like an overlay. There's some algorithmic stuff going on, surely, because it really reacts to the image. But what you can do, actually, if you want, you can go custom, change the amount, the size, the film resolution. And that brings me on to this point. I really like this effect. The film resolution, I think, is one of the most important points. You don't want to slap on a load of film effects and then have the footage still look like a 4K video that's been filmed on a phone through those effects. And film resolution is a really nice feature where you can adjust the resolution of the image and really drop that down. So if you're going for a really like vintage effect, so say you were doing an edit and making this like, oh, do you remember this in the past? And you were throwing on this effect to make it look like old footage, then you would really drop the film resolution down. Halation is basically where the red channels in the film reflect back through the film. And you may have seen it overdone and over the top in a lot of things, but you can do it in a subtle way. If we enable that on and off, we can sort of see what that's doing to the image. It's adding that glow. You can, of course, pick different ones. So Super 8 will be super halatially. Halatially? That's a word. That's definitely a word. But you can see it really, obviously, it almost adds like a orange saturation to the really bright parts in that factory in the background. And the nice thing is you can, of course, custom do your halation. So that is way too much and way too orangey, I think. So if I change the hue, I can actually change the color. So we can go from like an orange to a more yellowy. Bloom. This is one of my favorite parts of this plugin. This is basically a black Pro Mist filter in a plugin, which is great because you can just apply it to your footage and not have to carry around a black Pro Mist filter. Who wants to do that? Not me, but I probably still will have one. And that basically just adds a nice glow around highlights. It can be flattering to skin and it can be nice on shots that have those highlights to soften them down, especially if you've got like bright windows or bright highlights, like for example, an on-air sign. There are a few more effects if you want to go a little bit further. Next up, we have film damage, which sounds very aggressive, doesn't it? Basically, film damage is just what it says, it's film damage. So it's emulating errors on the film, scratches. So that's quite nice. That adds like a little subtle effect and it's not too overpowering, but you can of course go custom and change the dust amount, the scale, the size, the hair amount, the scratches. And I'll be honest, I ain't got time for that, so I'm just going for the default 35mm. And I do like a lot of these effects have a dial that allows you to control the impact. This one has one called Source Limiter, which does the same thing. So if you create a sort of feel or look that you're happy with, you can just dial it back if you just want it to be a little less or a little more. Film breath. That's the flickering that you get in film, where it goes slightly brighter or slightly darker as it's been projected. And as you can see, if we put that on, we have nothing much happening. But if we go Super 8, we can sort of really see that colors and brightness channels sort of go in and out, in and out. And although that's a really nice effect, I don't really like using that effect because I find it a bit distracting. So that's your creative choice, of course, but my creative choice is not to use it. And another one I probably won't use that much, but if you were trying to make a filmy film effect, is gate weave, which is where the image sort of bobbles and wobbles about as it's been projected and they're not quite aligned. So I'll go to the 8mm one again. I tell you what, I'll leave breathing on as well. So we've got all these effects as we go along. And as you can see, that creates that sort of judder. So that is a really nice, I think, effect. And if you want to go really obvious and really over the top, you've got Overscan, baby, which just adds a full overscan. And of course, we can pick lots of different options for the overscan, different types of film, which is really nice, actually. It's great that you've got those options in there. And then on the output, we have a total impact slider, which is great because if you found you've got the look that you want and you just want to tone it back a little bit, then you can do that. Obviously, it doesn't really work very well when you've got the Overscan feature set because it almost adds opacity to the Overscan, so we can sort of see what we've done to the image. But it's a great way of showing now what we've done through this image. So we've gone from this very flat log footage, and we've brought it forward to this filmy footage, which I think works. So let's talk about the cost before I dive into some of the improvements I'd like to see. The Pro version comes in at $449. However, there is a Lite version that's only $199, and both of those are perpetual licenses, so no subscriptions. So on the Lite version, you get grain, you get bloom, and you get film profiles, and basically you get the main features you want to create that filmy look, although you don't get a lot of the very film-specific dehancing effects. So if you compare it to something like, for example, Filmbox, which is another film emulating program plugin that works in very much the same way, it has a lot of the same effects, but that's about $1,000 to buy the perpetual license for that. One other option that I do have access to is DaVinci Resolve Studio, which in its own right is an entire NLE editing program, color grading suite, audio editor, all that jargon. But it also has a few effects or built-in plugins, like the new Film Look Creator, which does a lot of the effects that this does, for example, the halation and adding a film grain, but it's nowhere near as in-depth. DaVinci Resolve, by the way, is about $295, so cheaper than the Pro version of this plugin, but more expensive than the Lite version. And obviously DaVinci, as I said, is its own editor, so an edit suite. And it is a great tool if you were just getting into editing. But you could use both of these, that's an option. So improvements, I've got 3 big improvements that I would like to see in this app. Certainly number 1 would be the previews for the film stocks. At the moment, it's just a big drop-down text list. And I'm quite a visual person, I like to flick through and see different effects. And I think it would be much better if we had like a little preview box so we could flick through and see what it would do to the footage and which film stock I would like to see. Otherwise I have to click the big drop down and click another film stock, and there's no real quick way of flicking through either using your arrow keys or anything. And that does actually bring me onto the phone app, because the phone app is a great way of previewing all these film stocks. I've flicked through and found film emulation and film stock that I want to use in the Premiere plugin because I've got the phone app. So my suggestion overall there would be maybe include a package that includes the phone app so we can find the film stocks, or ultimately just improve the preview on the built-in plugin. Another improvement that I would like to see that I did touch on earlier on in the video is more cameras. I did mention that the drone footage I was using in this example, the drone isn't on that list. So I had to pick the next best thing, a D-Log-M profile from a different camera. I would like to see more cameras on there because the appeal of this is having like an all-in-one box of tricks that just takes the footage, converts it, and then adds a film effect, and everything feels like a good workflow in that way. And I did notice as well as that, a lot of the Nikon Z cameras were missing from that list, although there was a huge amount of Sony cameras. And my third and final suggestion, it's a little bit of a wild card suggestion, but perhaps adding VHS dehancing to the plugin would be nice, especially in the Pro version. For the price, I think it would be nice to have that extra look, extra feel, because at the moment it's really popular to go on set and use an old camcorder, a Hi8 VHS, something like that, to sort of throw in with this really high quality cinematic footage that you can get now. So overall, would I recommend this plugin? I think if you can afford it, or you can get the company you work for to buy it instead, or you can certainly warrant it through your work, then yeah, I'd recommend it. I think it's a nice plugin. Just to mention price, they did give me a 10% discount code for you to use in the description if you're interested. So thanks for watching. I hope you found this video interesting or useful in some way. I think I will be using this plugin going forward in my work. Maybe not all the time, but certainly if I feel like a video needs a filmy feel and a filmy look, and I'm feeling a little bit hipstery, then yeah, sure, I'm going to use it. Anyway, until the next one, catch you soon.